Hello, my friends. Tonight we continue with the book Treasure Island, and we begin with chapter 15, The Man of the Island. From the side of the hill, which was here steep and stony, a spout of gravel was dislodged and fell rattling and bounding through the trees. My eyes turned instinctively in that direction, and I saw a figure leap with great rapidity behind the trunk of a pine. What was it? Whether bear or man or monkey, I could in no wise tell. It seemed dark and shaggy. More I knew not, but the terror of this apparition brought me to a stand. I was now, it seemed, cut off upon the sides. Behind me, the murderers; before me, this lurking nondescript. And immediately I began to prefer the dangers that I knew to those I knew not. Silver himself appeared less terrible in contrast with this creature of the woods, and I turned on my heel, and looking sharply behind me, over my shoulder, began to retrace my steps in the direction of the boats. Instantly the figure reappeared, and, making a wide circuit, began to head me off. I was tired, at any rate, but had been as fresh as when I rose. I could see it was in vain for me to contend in speed with such an adversary. From the trunk to trunk, the creature flitted like a deer, running man-like on two legs, but unlike any man that I'd ever seen, stooping almost double as it ran. Yet a man it was. I could no longer be in doubt about that. I began to recall what I had heard of cannibals. I was within an ace of calling for help, but the mere fact that he was a man, however wild, had somewhat reassured me, and my fear of Silver began to revive in proportion. I stood still, therefore, and cast about for some method of escape, and, as I was so thinking, the recollection of my pistol flashed into my mind. As soon as I remembered, I was not defenseless. Courage glowed again in my heart, and set my face resolutely for this man of the island, and walked briskly toward him. He was concealed by this time behind a tree trunk, but he must have been watching me closely, for as soon as I began to move in his direction, he reappeared and took a step to meet me. Then he hesitated, drew back, came forward again, and at last, to my wonder and confusion, threw himself on his knees and held out his clasped hands in supplication. At that, I once more stopped. "Who are you?" I asked. "Ben Gunn," he answered, and his voice sounded hoarse and awkward, like a rusty lock. "I'm poor Ben Gunn, I am, and I haven't spoke with a Christian these 3 years." I could now see that he was a white man, like myself, and that his features were even pleasing. His skin, wherever it was exposed, was burnt by the sun. Even his lips were black, and his fair eyes looked quite startling in so dark a face. Of all the beggar men that I had seen or fancied, he was chief for raggedness. He was clothed with tatters of an old ship's canvas, an old sea cloth, and this extraordinary patchwork was all held together by a system of most various and incongruous fastenings, brass buttons, bits of stick, and loops of tarry gaskin. About his waist he wore an old brass-buckled leather belt, which was the one thing solid in his whole accoutrement. 3 years, I cried. "Were you shipwrecked?" "Nay, mate," said he, "marooned." I had heard the word, and I knew it stood for a horrible kind of punishment, common enough among buccaneers, in which the offender is put ashore with a little powder and shot and left behind on some desolate and distant island. "Marooned 3 years agone," he continued, "and lived on goats since then, and berries, and oysters. Wherever a man is," says I, "a man can do for himself. But, mate, my heart is sore for Christian diet. You mightn't happen to have a piece of cheese about you now." "No? Well, many's the long night I've dreamed of cheese, toasted mostly, and woke up again and here I were. If ever I can get aboard again, said I, you shall have cheese by the stone. All this time he had been feeling the stuff of my jacket, smoothing my hands, looking at my boots, and generally, in the intervals of his speech, showing a childish pleasure in the presence of a fellow creature. But at my last words he perked into a kind of startled slyness. If ever you can get aboard again, says you, he repeated. Why now, who's to hinder you? Not you, I know, was my reply. And right he was, he cried. Now you, what do you call yourself, mate? Jim, I told him. Jim, says he, quite pleased apparently. Well now, Jim, I've lived that rough as you'd be ashamed to hear of. Now, for instance, you wouldn't think I had a pious mother to look at me, he asked. Why, no, not in particular, I answered. Ah, well, said he, but I had remarkable pious, and I was a civil pious boy, and could rattle off my catechism that fast as couldn't tell one word from another. And hear what it has come to, Jim, and it began with Chuck Farthen on the blessed gravestones. That's what it begun with, but it went further than that. And so my mother told me and predicted the whole, she did, the pious woman. But it were Providence that put me here. I've thought it all out in here, these lonely island, and I'm back on piety. You don't catch me tasting rum so much, but just a thimbleful for luck. Of course, the first chance I have, I'm bound I'll be good, and I'll see the way too. And Jim, looking all around him and lowering his voice to a whisper, I'm rich. I now felt sure that the poor fellow had gone crazy in his solitude, and I suppose I must have shown the feeling in my face, for he repeated the statement hotly. Rich, I say. And I'll tell you what, I'll make a man of you, Jim. Ah, Jim, you'll bless your stars, you will. You was the first that found me. And at this, there came suddenly a lowering shadow over his face, and he tightened his grasp on my hand and raised a forefinger threateningly before my eyes. Now, Jim, you tell me true. That ain't Flint's ship, he asked. At this, I had a happy inspiration. I began to believe that I had found an ally, and I answered him at once. It's not Flint's ship, and Flint is dead. But I'll tell you true, as you ask me, there are some of Flint's hands aboards, whose luck for the rest of us is actually worse luck for the rest of us. Not a man with one leg, he gasped. Silver, I asked. Ah, Silver, says he. That were his name. He's the cook and the ringleader, too. He was still holding me by the wrist, and at that he give it quite a ring. If you was sent by Long John, he said, I'm as good as pork, and I know it. But where was you, do you suppose? I had made my mind up in a moment, and by way of an answer told him the whole story of our voyage and the predicament in which we found ourselves. He heard me with the keenest interest, and when I had done, he patted me on the head. You're a good lad, Jim, he said, and you're all in a clove hitch, ain't you? Well, you just put your trust in Ben Gunn. Ben Gunn's the man to do it. Would you think it likely now that your squire would prove a liberal-minded one in case of help him being in a clove hitch, as you remark? I told him the squire was the most liberal of all men. Aye, but you see, returned Ben Gunn, I didn't mean giving me a gate to keep and a shunt of livery clothes and such. That's not my mark, Jim. What I mean is, would he be likely to come down to the tune of, say, 1,000 pounds out of money that's as good of a man's own already? I am sure he would, said I. As it was, all hands were to share. And a passage home? He added with a look of great shrewdness. Why, I cried, the squire's a gentleman, and besides, If we got rid of the others, we shouldn't want you to help work the vessel home. Or we actually should want you, and we would need you to help work the vessel home. Ah, said he, so you would. And he seemed very much relieved. Now, I'll tell you what, he went on. So much I'll tell you, and no more. I were in Flint's ship when he buried the treasure. He and 6 along, 6 strong seamen. They was ashore nigh on a week, and us standing off, and on a cold, and in the old Walrus. One fine day, up went the signal, and here come Flint himself, in a little boat, and his head done up in a blue scarf. The sun was getting up, the mortal white. He looked about the cutwater. But there he was, you mind you, and 6 all dead, dead and buried. How he done it, not a man aboard us could make out. It was a battle, murder, and sudden death leastways, him against 6. Billy Bones was the mate. Long John, he was quartermaster, and they asked him where the treasure was. Ah, says he, you can go ashore if you like, and stay, he says. But as for the ship, she'll beat up for more by thunder. That's what he said. Well, I was in another ship 3 years back, and we sighted this island. Boys, said I, here's Flint's treasure. Let's land and find it. The captain was displeased at that, but my messmates were all of a mind and landed. 12 days they looked for it, and every day had worse word for me, until one fine morning all hands went aboard. As for you, Benjamin Gunn, they says, here's a musket, they says, and a spade and a pickaxe. You can stay here and find Flint's money for yourself, they says. Well, Jim, 3 years have I been here, and not a bite of Christian diet from this day to this. But now you look here, look at me. Do I look like a man before the mast? No, says you, nor I weren't, neither, I says. And with that he winked and pinched me hard. Just you mention them words to your squire, Jim, he went on. Nor he weren't, neither. That's the words. 3 years he were the man of this island, light and dark, fair and rain, and sometimes he would maybe think upon a prayer, says you, and sometimes he would maybe think of this old mother, so be as she's alive, you'll say. But the most part of Gunn's time, this is what you'll say, the most part of the time was took up with another matter, and then you'll give him a nip, like I do. And he pinched me again in the most confidential manner. Then, he continued, then you'll up, and you'll say this, Gunn is a good man, you'll say, and he puts a precious sight more confidence, a precious sight, mind that, in a gentleman born than in these gentlemen of fortune, having been one himself. Well, I said, I don't understand one word that you've been saying, but that's neither here nor there, for how I am to get aboard. Ah, said he, that's the hitch for sure. Well, there's my boat. That I made with my own 2 hands. I keep her under a white rock. It's the worst come to the worst. We might try that after dark. Hi, he broke out. What's that? For just then, although the sun had still an hour or 2 to run, all the echoes of the island awoke and bellowed to the thunder of a cannon. They have begun the fight, I cried. Follow me. And I begun to run towards the anchorage, my terrors all forgotten, while close at my side the marooned man in his goatskins trotted easily and lightly. Left, left, says he. Keep to your left hand, mate. Jim, under the trees with you. There's where I killed my first goat. They don't come down here now. They're all mast-headed, on them mountings, for the fear of Benjamin Gunn. Ah, and there's the cemetery. Cemetery, he must have meant. You see the mounds? I come here and prayed. nows and thens, when I thought maybe a Sunday would be about due. I weren't quite a chapel, but it seemed more solemn-like. And then, says you, Ben Gunn was short-handed, no chaplain, nor so much as a Bible and a flag, you says. So he kept talking as I ran, neither expecting nor receiving any answer. The cannon shot was followed after a considerable interval by a volley of small arms. Another pause, and then, not a quarter of a mile in front of me, I beheld the Union Jack fluttering in the air above a wood. Part 4, The Stockade. Chapter 16, How the Ship was Abandoned. It was about 1:30, 3 bells in the sea phase, that the 2 boats went ashore from the Hispaniola. The captain, the squire, and I were talking matters over in the cabin. Had there been a breath of wind, we should have fallen on 6 mutineers who were left aboard with us, slipped our cable, and away to sea. But the wind was wanting, and to complete our helplessness, down came Hunter with the news that Jim Hawkins had slipped into a boat and was gone ashore with the rest. It never occurred to us to doubt Jim Hawkins, but we were alarmed for his safety. With the men in the temper they were in, it seemed an even chance if we should see the lad again. We ran on the deck, and pitch was bubbling in the seams. The nasty stench of the place turned me sick. If ever a man smelt fever and dysentery, it was in that abominable anchorage. The 6 scoundrels were sitting grumbling under the sail in the forecastle. Ashore we could see the gigs made fast, and a man sitting in each. Hard by the river runs in. One of them was whistling Lillibullero. Waiting was a strain, and it was decided that Hunter and I should go ashore with the jolly boat in quest for information. The gigs had learned to their right, but Hunter and I pulled straight in the direction of the stockade upon the chart. The 2 who were left guarding their boats seemed in a bustle at our appearance. Lillibullero stopped off, and I could see the pair discussing what they ought to do. Had they gone and told Silver, all might have turned out differently, but they had their orders, I suppose, and they decided to sit quietly there where they were and hark back again. Lillibullero. There was a slight bend in the coast, and I steered so as to it was between us. Even before we landed, we had thus sight of the gigs. I jumped out and came near, running as I durst, with a big silk handkerchief under my hat for coolness' sake, a brace of pistols ready primed for safety. I had not gone 100 yards when I reached the stockade. This was how it was. A spring of clear water rose almost at the top of a knoll. Well, on the knoll, and enclosing the spring, they had clapped a stout log house, fit to hold 20 people on a pinch, and a loophole for musketry on either side. All round this they had cleared a wide space, and then the thing was completed by paling 6 feet high, without door or opening, too strong to pull down without time and labor, and too open to shelter the besiegers. The people in the log house had them in every way. They stood quiet in the shelter and shot the others like partridges. All they wanted was a good watch and food, for short of a complete surprise, they might have held the place against a regiment. What particularly took my fancy was the spring, for though we had good enough place of it in the cabin of the Hispaniola, with plenty of arms and ammunition, and things to eat, and excellent wines, there had been one thing overlooked. We had no water. I was thinking this over when came the ringing of the island, the cry of a man at the point of death. I was not new to a violent death. I have served His Royal Highness the Duke of Cumberland, and had got a wound myself in the Fontenoy, but I know my pulse went a dot and carry one. Jim Hawkins is gone. was my first thought. It is something to have been an old soldier, but more still to have been a doctor. This is no time to dilly-dally in our work. And so now I made up my mind instantly, and with no time lost, returned to the shore and jumped on board the jolly boat. Good fortune, Hunter pulled a good oar. We made the water fly, and the boat was soon alongside, I aboard the schooner. I found them all shaken, as was natural. The squire was sitting down, as white as a sheet, thinking of the harm he had led us to, the good soul. And one of the 6 forecastle hands was a little better. There's a man, says Captain Smollett, nodding toward him, new to this work. He came nigh hand, fainting, doctor, when he heard the cry. Another touch of the rudder, and the man would join us. I told my plan to the captain, and between us we settled on the details of this accomplishment. We put old Redruth in the gallery between the cabin and the forecastle, with 3 or 4 loaded muskets and a mattress for protection. Hunter brought the boat round under the stern port, and Joyce and I set the work loading with her powder tins, muskets, bags of biscuits, kegs of pork, and a cask of cognac in my invaluable medicine chest. In the meantime, the squire and the captain stayed on deck, and the latter hailed the coxswain, who was the principal man aboard. My hands, he said, here are 2 of us, with a brace of pistols each. If any of you 6 make signal of any description, the man's dead. They were a good deal taken aback, and after a little consultation, one of all tumbled down the fore companion, thinking no doubt to take us on the rear. But when they saw Redruth waiting for them in the spar galley, they went about the ship at once, and a head popped out again on deck. Down, dog, cries the captain, and the head popped back again, and we heard no more, for the time of these 6 very faint-hearted seamen. By this time, tumbling things in as they came, we had the jolly boat loaded as much as we dared. Joyce and I got out through the stern port, and when we made for the shore again as fast as oars could take us, the second trip fairly aroused the watchers along the shore. Lillibero was dropped again, and just before we lost sight of them, behind the little point, one of them whipped ashore and disappeared. I had half a mind to change my plan and destroy their boats, but I feared that Silver and the others might be close at hand, and all might be well and might be lost by trying for too much. We had soon touched the land in the same place as before, and set to provision the blockhouse. All 3 made the first journey, heavily laden, and tossed our stores over the palisade. Then, leaving Joyce to guard them, 1 man to be sure, but with half a dozen muskets, Hunter and I returned to the jolly boat and loaded ourselves once more. We proceeded without pausing to take breath, till the whole cargo was bestowed, when the 2 servants took up their position in the blockhouse, and I, with all my powder, sculled back to the Hispaniola. That we should have risked a second boat load seems more daring than it really was. They had the advantage of numbers, of course, but we had the advantage of arms. Not one of the men ashore had a musket, and before they could get within range for a pistol shooting, we flattened ourselves. We should be able to give good account of a half a dozen at least. The squire was waiting for me at the stern window, all his faintness gone from him. He caught the painter and made it fast, and we fell to loading the boat for our very lives. Pork, powder, and biscuit was the cargo, with only a musket and a cutlass apiece for the squire and me and Redruth and the captain. The rest of the arms and powder we dropped overboard in 2 fathoms and a half of water, so that we could see the bright steel shining far below in the sun on that clean sandy bottom. But this time the tide was beginning to ebb, and the ship was swinging round her anchor. Voices were heard faintly hallooing in the direction of the 2 gigs, and though this reassured us for Joyce and Hunter, who were well to the eastward. It warned our party to be off. Redruth retreated his place from the galley and dropped into the boat, which we then brought round the ship's counter to be handier for Captain Smollett. "Now, men," said he, "do you hear me?" There was no answer from the forecastle. "It's to you, Abraham Gray. It's to you I am speaking." Still no reply. Gray resumed Mr. Smollett, a little louder. "I am leaving this ship, and I order you to follow your captain. I order you. Are you a good man at the bottom? And I dare say not one of the lot of you's as bad as he makes out. I have my watch here in my hand. I give you 30 seconds to join me in." There was a pause. "Come, my fine fellow," continued the captain. "Don't hang so long in stays. I'm risking my life and lives of these good gentlemen every second." There was a sudden scuffle, a sound of blows, and out burst Abraham Gray with a knife cut on the side of his cheek, and came running to the captain like a dog to a whistle. "I'm with you, sir," said he. And the next moment he and the captain had dropped aboard of us, and we had shoved off and given way. We were clear out of the ship, but not yet ashore in our stockade. Chapter 17. The Jolly Boat's Last Trip. This 5th trip was quite different from any of the others. In the first place, the little gallipot of a boat that we were in was gravely overloaded. 5 grown men, and 3 of them, Trelawney, Redruth, and the captain, over 6 feet high, was already more than she was meant to carry, and to add powder, pork, and bread bags, the gunwale was lipping astern. Several times we shipped a little water, and my breeches and the tails of my coat were all soaking wet before we had gone 100 yards. The captain made us trim the boat, and we got here to lie a little more evenly. All the same, we were afraid to breathe. In the second place, the ebb was now making a strong rippling current, running westward through the basin, and then southward and seaward down the straits by which we had entered the morning. Even the ripples were a danger to our overloaded craft. But the worst of it was we were swept out of our true course and away from our proper landing place behind the point. If we let the current have its way, we should come ashore beside the gigs, where the pirates might appear at any moment. "I cannot keep head for the stockade, sir," said the captain. I was steering, while he and Redruth, 2 fresh men, were at the oars. "The tide keeps washing her down. Could you pull a little stronger?" "Not without swamping the boat," said he. "You must bear up, sir, if you please. Bear up until you see you're gaining." I tried, and found by experiment that the tide kept sweeping us westward until I had laid her head due east, or just about right angles to the way we ought to go. "We never get ashore at this rate," said I. "If it's only course that we can lie, sir, we must even lie it," returned the captain. "We must keep upstream. You see, sir," he went on, "if once we drop to leeward of the landing place, it's hard to say where we should get ashore, besides the chance of being boarded by the gigs, whereas the way we go the current must slacken, and then we can dodge back along the shore." "The current's less already, sir," said the man Gray, who was sitting in the foresheets. "You can ease her off a bit." "Thank you, my man," said I, quite as if nothing had happened, for we had quietly made up our minds to treat him like one of ourselves. Suddenly the captain spoke up again, and I thought his voice was a little changed. "The gun," said he. "I have thought of that," said I, for I made sure he was thinking of a bombardment of the fort. "They could never get the gun ashore, and if they did, they could never haul it through the woods." "Look astern, doctor," replied the captain. We had entirely forgotten the long 9, and there, to our horror, were 5 rogues busy about her, getting her jacket, as they called the stout tarpaulin, cover under which she had sailed. Not only that, but it flashed into my mind that at the same moment that the round shot and the powder for the gun had been left behind, and a stroke with an axe would put it all into the possession of the evil ones aboard. Israel was Flint's gunner, said Gray hoarsely. At any risk, we put the boat's head direct for the landing place. By this time, we had got so far out of the run of the current that we kept steerage way, even at our necessarily gentle rate of rowing, and I could keep her steady for the goal. But the worst of it was within the course I now held. We turned our broadside instead of our stern to the Hispaniola and offered a target like a barn door. I could hear as well as see that brandy-faced rascal, Israel Hands, plumping down a round shot on the deck. Who's the best shot? Asked the captain. Mr. Trelawney, out and away, said I. Mr. Trelawney, will you please pick me off one of these mins, sir? Hands if possible, said the captain. Trelawney was cool as steel. He looked at the priming of his gun. Now, cried the captain, easy with that gun, sir, or you'll swamp the boat. All hands stand by to trim when he aims. The squire raised his gun, and rowing ceased, and we leaned over the other side to keep the balance, and all was so nicely contrived that we did not ship a drop. They had the gun by this time, slewed round upon a swivel, and Hands, who was at the muzzle with the rammer, was in consequence the most exposed. However, we had no luck, for just as Trelawney fired, down he stopped, the ball whistled over him, and it was one of the other four who fell. The cry he gave was echoed not only by his companions on board, but by the great number of voices from the shore. And looking in that direction, I saw the other pirates trooping out from among the trees and tumbling into their places in the boats. Here come the gigs, sir, said I. Give way, then, cried the captain. We mustn't mind if we swamp her now. If we can get ashore, all's up. Only one of the gigs is being manned, sir, I added. The crew of the other most likely going round by shore to cut us off. They'll have a hot run, sir. He returned, Captain. Jack, ashore. You know, it's not them I mind. It's the round shot. Capped carpet bowls. My lady's maid couldn't miss. Tell us, squire, when you see the match, and we'll hold water. In the meantime, we had been making headway at a good pace for a boat so overloaded, and we had shipped but little water in the process. We were now close in, 30 or 40 strokes, and we should beach for her. For the ebb had already disclosed a narrow belt of sand below the clustered trees. The gig was no longer to be feared. The little point had already concealed it from our eyes. The ebb tide, which had so cruelly delayed us, was now making reparation and delaying our assailants. The one source of danger was the gun. If I durst, said the captain, I'd stop and pick off another man. But it was plain that they meant nothing should delay their shot. They had never so much as loaded at their fallen comrade. Though he was not dead, and I could see him trying to crawl away. Ready? Cried the squire. Hold! Cried the captain, quick as an echo. And he and Redruth backed with a great heave and sent her stern boldly under water. The report fell in the same instant of time. This was the first that Jim heard, the sound of the squire's shot not having reached him. Where the ball passed, not one of us precisely knew, but I fancy it must have been over our heads, and that the wind of it may have contributed to our disaster. At any rate, the boat sank by the stern quite gently in 3 feet of water, leaving the captain and myself facing each other on our feet. The other 3 took complete headers and came up drenched and bubbling. So far, there was no great harm. No lives were lost, and we could wade ashore in safety. but there were all of our stores at the bottom. And to make things worse, only 2 guns out of the 5 remained in a state of service. Mine I had snatched from my knees and held it over my head by a sort of instinct. As for the captain, he had carried his over his shoulder by a bandolier, like a wise man, lock upmost, and the other 3 had gone down with the boat. To add to our concern, we heard voices already drawing near us in the woods along the shores, and we had not only the danger of being cut off from the stockade in our half-crippled state, but the fear before us of whether, if Hunter and Joyce were attacked by half a dozen, they would have the sense to stand firm. Hunter was steady, that we knew. Joyce was a doubtful case, a pleasant, polite man for a valet, and to brush one's clothes, but not entirely fitted for a man of war. With all of this in our minds, we waded ashore as fast as we could, leaving behind the poor jolly boat and a good half of all our powder and provisions. Chapter 18. The end of the first day's fighting. We made our best speed across the strip of wood that now divided us from the stockade, and at every step we took, the voices of the buccaneers rang nearer. Soon we could hear their footfalls as they ran, and the crackling of the branches as they breasted across a bit of thicket. I began to see we should have a brush for it in the earnest, and looked to my priming. "Captain," I said, "Trelawney is the dead shot. Give him your gun. His own is useless." They exchanged guns, and Trelawney, silent and cool as he had been since the beginning of all the bustle, hung for a moment on his heels to see that all was fit for service. At the same time, observing Gray to be unarmed, I handed him my cutlass. It did all our hearts good to see him spit in his hand, knit his brows, and make the blade sling through the air. It was plain from every line of his body that our new hand was worth his salt. 40 paces farther, we came to the edge of the wood and saw the stockade in front of us. We struck the enclosure about the middle of the south side, and almost at the same time, 7 mutineers, Job, Anderson, and Boatswain, at their heads appeared in full cry at the southwestern corner. They paused as if taken aback, and before they recovered, not only the squire and I, but Hunter and Joyce from the blockhouse had time to fire. The 4 shots came in rather scattering a volley, but they did the business. One of the enemy actually fell. The rest, without hesitation, turned and plunged into the trees. After reloading, we walked down the outside of the palisade to see the fallen enemy. He was stone dead, shot through the heart. We began to rejoice over our good success when just at that moment a pistol cracked in the bush. A ball whistled close by my ear, and poor Tom Redruth stumbled and fell his length on the ground. Both the squire and I returned the shot, but as had nothing to aim at, it's probably only wasted powder. Then we reloaded and turned our attention to poor Tom. The captain and Gray were already examining him, and I saw with half an eye that all was over. I believe the readiness of our return of volley had scattered the mutineers once more. We were suffered without further molestation to get the poor old gamer hoisted over the stockade and carried groaning and bleeding into the log house. Poor old fellow, he had not uttered a word of surprise, complaint, or fear, or even acquiescence from the very beginning of our troubles till now, when we had laid him down in the log house to die. He had lain like a Trojan behind his mattress in the gallery. He had followed every order silently, doggedly, and well. He was the oldest of our party by the score of years, and now, sullen, old, serviceable servant, it was he that was to die. The squire dropped down beside his knees, and kissed his hand, crying like a child. "Be I going, doctor?" he asked. "Tom, my man," said I, "you're going home." "I wish I had a lick at them with the gun first," he replied. "Tom," said the squire, you forgive me, won't you?" "Would that be respectful like from me to you, squire?" was the answer. However so it be, amen. After a while of silence, he said he thought somebody might read a prayer. It's the custom, sir, he added apologetically, and not long after, without another word, he passed away. In the meantime, the captain, whom I had observed to be wonderfully swollen about the chest and pockets, had turned out a great many various stores, the British colors, a Bible, a coil of stoutish rope, pen, ink, a logbook, pounds of tobacco. He had found a longish fir tree lying felled and trimmed in the enclosure, and with the help of Hunter, he had set up in the corner a log house where the trunks crossed and made an angle. Then, climbing on the roof, he had, with his own hand bent and run up the colors. This seemed mightily to relieve him. He re-entered the log house and set about counting up the stores as if nothing else existed. But he had an eye on Tom's passage for all that, and soon as all was over, came forward with another flag and reverently spread it on the body. "Don't you take on, sir," he said, shaking the squire's hand. "All's well with him. No fear for the hand that's been shot down in his duty to the captain and owner. It mayn't be good divinity, but it is a fact." Then he pulled me aside. "Dr. Livesey," he said, "in how many weeks do you and the squire expect the consort?" I told him it was a question of not weeks but months, that if we were not back by the end of August, Blandley was to send to find us, but neither sooner nor later. "You can calculate for yourself," I said. "Why, yes," returned the captain, scratching his head, "and making a large allowance, sir, for all the gifts of Providence. Should say we were pretty close hauled." "How do you mean?" I asked. "It's a pity, sir. We lost that second load. That's what I mean," replied the captain. "As for powder and shot, we'll do, but the rations are short, very short, so short, Dr. Livesey, that we're perhaps as well without the extra mouth." And he pointed to the dead body under the flag. Just then, with a roar and a whistle, round shot passed high above the roof of the log house and plumped far beyond us in the woods. "Oh!" said the captain. "Blaze away. You've lifted enough powder already, my lads." At second trial, the aim was better, and the ball descended inside the stockade, scattering a cloud of sand, but no further damage. "Captain," said the squire, "the house is quite invisible from the ship. It must be the flag that they're aiming at. Would it not be wiser to take it in?" "Strike my colors," cried the captain. "No, sir, not I." And as soon as he had said the words, I think we all agreed with him, for it was not only a piece of stout, seamanly good feeling, it was good policy besides, and showed our enemies that we despised their cannonade. Although the evening they kept thundering away, ball after ball flew over and fell short or kicked up sand in the enclosure, but they had to fire so high that the shot fell dead and buried itself in the soft sand. We had no ricochet to fear, and though one popped through the roof of the log house and out again through the floor, we soon got used to the sort of horseplay and minded it no more than a cricket. "There is one good thing about all of this," observed the captain. "The wood in front of us is likely clear, and the ebb has made a good while our stores should be uncovered. Volunteers go and bring in the pork." Gray and Hunter were the first to come forward. Well armed, they stole out of the stockade, but it proved useless mission. The mutineers were bolder than we faced, and or were more trust in Israel's gunnery, for 4 or 5 of them were busy carrying off our stores and wading out with them to one of the gigs that lay close by, pulling an oar or so to hold her steady against the current. Silver was in the stern sheets in command, and every man on them was now provided with a musket from some secret magazine of their own. The captain sat down to his log, and here is the beginning of the entry. Alexander Smollett, Master David Livesey, ship's doctor Abraham Gray, carpenter's mate John Trelawney, owner John Hunter, and Richard Joyce, owner's servants, landsmen, being all that is left faithful of the ship's company, with the stores for 10 days at Short's rations, come ashore this day and flew British colors on the log house in Treasure Island. Thomas Redruth, owner's servant, landsman, shot by the mutineers. James Hawkins, cabin boy. At the same time, I was wondering over the poor Jim Hawkins' fate. A hail on the land side, somebody hailing us, said Hunter, who was on guard. Doctor, Squire, Captain, hello, Hunter, is that you? Came the cries, and I ran to the door in time to see Jim Hawkins, safe and sound, and climbing over the stockade. Chapter 19. The Garrison in the Stockade. As soon as Ben Gunn saw the colors, he came to halt, stopped me by the arm, and sat down. Now, said he, there's your friends, sure enough. Far more likely it's the mutineers, I answered. That, he cried. Why, in a place like this, where nobody puts in but gentlemen of fortune, silver would fly the Jolly Roger. You don't make no doubt of that. No, that's your friends. There's been blows, too, and I reckon your friends has had the best of it. And here they are, ashore in the old stockade, as made years and years ago by Flint. Ah, he was a man to have a headpiece, was Flint. Barring rum, his match was never seen. He was afraid of none, not he, only silver. Silver was that genteel. Well, said I, that may be so, and so be it. All the more reason that I should hurry on and join my friends. Nay, mate, returned Ben, not you. You're a good boy. I'm mistook, but you're only a boy, all told. Now Ben Gunn's fly. Rum wouldn't bring me there. Where are you going? Not rum wouldn't, till I see you're born gentleman, and gets it in his word of honor. And you won't forget my words, a precious sight. That's what you'll say, a precious sight, more confidence. And then nips him. And he pinched me hard a third time with the same air of cleverness. And when Ben Gunn is wanted, you know where to find him, Jim. Just where you found him today. And him that comes is to have a white flag in his hand, and he's to come alone. Oh, and you'll say this, Ben Gunn says you, his reasons of his own. Well, said I believe I understand. You have something to propose, and you wish to see the squire or the doctor, and you'll be found where I found you. Is that all? And when, says you, he added. Why, from about noon observation to about 6 bells. Good, said I, and now may I go? You won't forget, he inquired anxiously. Precious sight, and reasons of his own, says you. Reasons of his own. That's the mainstay. As between man and man. Well then, still holding me, I reckon you can go, Jim. And Jim, if you was to see silver, you wouldn't go for to sell Ben Gunn, would you? Wild horses wouldn't draw it from you. No, says you. And if them pirates came ashore, Jim, what would you say but there'd be witters in the morning? Here he was interrupted by a loud report, and a cannonball came tearing through the trees and pitched in the sand not 100 yards from where we were two talking. The next moment each of us had taken to his heels in a different direction. For a good hour to come, frequent reports shook the island. The balls kept crashing through the woods. I moved from hiding place to hiding place, always pursued, or so it seemed to me, by these terrifying missiles. But towards the end of the bombardment, though still I durst not venture in the direction of the stockade, where the balls fell oftenest, I had begun, in a manner, to pluck up my heart again, and after a long detour in the east, crept down among the shore-side trees. The sun had just set. The sea breeze was rustling. The tumbling in the woods was ruffling, and the gray surface of Anchorage, the tide, too, was far out. The great tracts of sand lay uncovered, and air after heat of day chilled me through my jacket. The Hispaniola still lay where she had anchored, but, sure enough, there was a Jolly Roger, the black flag of piracy, flying from her peak. Even as I looked, there came another red flash and another report that just sent the echoes clattering, and one more round shot whistled through the air. It was the last of the cannonade. I lay for some time watching the bustle which succeeded the attack. Men were demolishing something from axes on the beach where the stockade and the poor jolly boat. I afterwards discovered, away near the mouth of the river, a great fire was glowing among the trees, and between that point and the ship was one of the gigs, coming and going the men, whom I had seen so gloomy, shouting at the oars like children. But there was a sound in their voices which suggested rum. At length I thought I might return towards the stockade. I was pretty far down on the low, a sandy spit that encloses the anchorage to the east and is joined at half water to Skeleton Island. And now, as I rose to my feet, I saw at some distance further down the spit, and rising from among the low bushes, an isolated rock, pretty high and peculiarly white in color. It occurred to me that this might be the White Rock of which Ben Gunn had spoken. At some day or another, a boat might be wanted, and I should know for where to look for one. Then I skirted among the woods until I had regained my rear, or shoreward side of the stockade, and was soon warmly welcomed by the faithful party. I had soon told my story and began looking about me. The log house was made of unsquared trunks of pine, roof, walls, and floor. The latter stood several places as much as a foot or a foot and a half above the surface of the sand. There was a porch at the door, and under this porch the little spring welled up into an artificial basin, or rather odd kind, no other than a great ship's kettle iron, and with the bottom knocked out and sunk to her bearings, as the captain said, among the sand. Little had been left besides the framework of the house, but in the corner there was a stone slab laid down by way of a hearth, and an old rusty iron basket to contain the fire. The slopes of the knoll and the inside of the stockade had been cleared of timber to build the house, and we could see by the stumps what a fine and lofty grove had been destroyed. Most of the soil had been washed away and buried in the drift after the removal of the trees. Only where the streamlet ran down from the kettle, a thick bed of moss and some ferns and a little creeping of bushes was still green among the sand. Very close around the stockade, too close for defense, they said, the wood still flourished, high and dense, all of fir on the land side, but towards the sea with a large admixture of live oaks. The cold evening breeze of which I have spoken whistled through every chink of the rude building, and sprinkled the floor with a continual rain of fine sand. There was sand in our eyes, sand in our teeth, sand in our suppers, sand dancing in the spring at the bottom of the kettle, for all the world like porridge beginning to boil. Our chimney was a square hole in the roof. It was but a little part of the smoke that found its way out, and the rest eddied about in the house, and kept us coughing and piping the eye. Add to this that Gray, the new man, had his face tied up in a bandage for a cut he had got in breaking away from the mutineers, and that poor old Tom Redruth, still unburied, lay along the wall, stiff and stark, under the Union Jack. If we had been allowed to sit idle, we should all have fallen in the blues, but Captain Smollett was never the man for that. All hands were called up before him, and he divided us into the watches. the doctor and Gray and I for one, the squire and Hunter and Joyce upon the other. Tired though we all were, 2 were sent out for firewood, 2 more were set to dig a grave for Redruth, and the doctor was named cook. I was put sentry at the door, and the captain himself went from one to another, keeping up our spirits and lending a hand wherever it was wanted. From time to time the doctor came to the door for a little air and to rest his eyes, which were almost smoked out of his head, and whenever he did, he had a word for me. "That man Smollett," he said once, "is a better man than I am. And when I say that, it means a deal, Jim." Another time he came and was silent for a while. Then he put his head on one side and looked at me. "Is this Ben Gunn a man?" he asked. "I do not know, sir," said I. "I am not very sure whether he's sane." "Is there any doubt about the matter? He is?" returned the doctor. "A man who has been 3 years biting his nails on a desert island, Jim, can't be expected to appear as sane as you and me. It doesn't lie that way in human nature." "Was it cheese you said he had fancy for?" "Yes, sir, cheese," I answered. "Well, Jim," says he, "just see the good that comes of being dainty in your food. You've seen my snuff box, haven't you? And you never saw me take snuff. The reason being that in my snuff box I carry a piece of Parmesan cheese, a cheese made in Italy, very nutritious. Well, that's for Ben Gunn." Before supper was eaten, we buried old Tom in the sand and stood round him for a while, beheaded in the breeze. I should say, bareheaded in the breeze. A good deal of firewood had been got in, but not enough for the captain's fancy, and he took his head over it and told us we must get back to this tomorrow rather livelier. Then, when we had eaten our pork and each of us had a stiff glass of brandy grog, the 3 chefs, or I should say the 3 chiefs, got together in a corner to discuss our prospects. It appears they were at their wits' end what to do, the stores being so low that we must have been starved into surrender before help came. But our best hope, it was decided, was to kill off the buccaneers until they either hauled down their flag or ran away with the Hispaniola. From 19, they were already reduced to 15. 2 others were wounded, and 1 at least, the man shot beside the gun, severely wounded, if he were not dead. Every time we had a crack at them, we were to take it, saving our own lives, with the extremest of care. And besides that, we had 2 able allies, rum and the climate. As for the first, though we were about half a mile away, we could hear them roaring and singing late into the night. And as for the second, the doctor staked his wig that camp where we were in the marsh, and unprovided with remedies, the half of them would be on their backs before a week. So he added, "If we are not all shot down first, they'll be glad to be packing in the schooner. It's always a ship, and they can get to buccaneering again, I suppose." "First ship that I ever lost," said Captain Smollett. "I was dead tired, as you may fancy, and when I got to sleep, which was not till after a great deal of tossing, I slept like a log of wood. The rest had long been up and had already breakfasted, and increased the pile of firewood by half as much again when I awakened by the bustle and the sound of voices. 'Flag of truce?' I heard someone say, and then immediately after, with a cry of surprise, 'Silver himself.' And at that I jumped up, rubbing my eyes, ran a loophole in the wall." And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 19. Wow, this is getting pretty exciting. Unfortunately, a lot of violence and some death, but we have 2 clear sides now: the mutineers and the good people of the ship under Captain Smollett and Dr. Livesey and the squire, Tolanagy. These are the men that we must root for now. How it all shakes out, we don't know. And how Mr. Gunn will play into this shall be interesting. So until next Monday, when we return with chapter 20, thank you for joining me. Have a good weekend. This has been Indiana Homes, and love to you all.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.